So there's been a lot of, I guess, world events and also documentaries lately that have really been making me have an incredibly strong resolve not to close my heart to others. Just seeing the incredible harm that comes from that and seeing how I do it to others all the time and really strengthening that resolve to not want to do that. And so I have a couple stories that I want to share of how I've been working with that. A couple weeks ago, I went to New York to visit my brother and for my niece's bat mitzvah. And the day I flew out, I had a couple extra hours. And so I decided to be adventurous and go into the big city by myself and go to Tibet House because they had a display and I just wanted to do something and make some Tibetan connection. And so I looked up the subway lines and figured out how to get there. And luckily, it was only a block away from the subway line. So I was like, okay, I can get there on my own. And I did that, and I went. And when I left it was actually the path, because my brother lives in New Jersey. And when I left the subway station, I was like, okay, remember where I'm at so that I can come back and find my way back to Hoboken, New Jersey. And so I did that. I saw the Tibetan house. And then I went back to the entrance, and I realized, oh, right, the subways go one way. Like, I don't go back to the same entrance that I came out of. I need to find a different entrance. And I was like, where's that other entrance? So I asked a guy that was kind of leaning against a wall, kind of just waiting. And he had the coldest response. He just put his hand up to me and just completely rejected me, not saying anything to me. And I was like, I'm just asking where the path is. And he kind of just incredibly cold-hearted, just kind of closed, put his hand in my face and was like, leave me alone, no interaction. So luckily it was New York City and there's tons of people, so I walked a few steps to another person that was kind of a younger woman that had earbuds in, and she took her earbuds out, and I asked her, do you know how I can get the path going back to Hoboken, New Jersey? And she was like, oh, the path? I'm not too familiar with that. And we started looking kind of at the road intersection to see, and then immediately two other people walked up and were like, where do you need to go? What are you looking for? How can we help? And I said, oh, I'm trying to get back to Hoboken. And they were like, oh, it's across the street. And so it was a very lovely interaction. So within 30 seconds, I had kind of those two extremes. And later in reflecting on it, I was thinking, at first I was kind of really hurt from that guy's reaction towards me. But I thought about it, and maybe one, he didn't speak English. Maybe he didn't know at all. And two, even if he did, he completely missed out on an opportunity to help. And to have your heart closed like that doesn't feel good. So it was good to really just recognize that and not have anger or animosity to this guy, but just like, wow, that doesn't feel good to close your heart to other people. Whereas on the other hand, the people that did help me, we had a beautiful interaction and they could walk away feeling good and connected, that we had that nice little moment. And another story that I've worked with in my mind is when I lived in Ethiopia, I had gone on a 10-hour bus ride to visit a friend for the Christmas holidays. And as soon as I got off the bus, a very large Ethiopian woman walked up to me and punched me in the face and said, fucking Swiss. And I was just like totally shocked and just like, where did that come from? And I think the thing that hurt the most actually was that there was a police officer standing right next to me and saw the whole thing. And I was like, in Amharic, like, do something, what are you gonna do? And he was just like, shook his head and kind of walked away. And I was like, dumbfounded. And of course, at first I was hurt and just like, oh, how horrible to get punched in the face by that woman. But now, I don't know, when we read our prayers after lunch of the line, may those who scold me, make me unhappy, hit me, attack me with weapons, or do things up to the point of killing, may they attain the happiness of enlightenment. I think of this woman every time, and my heart has really softened towards her and just really thought of like, I don't know what Swiss person did something to harm her in the past, but it was incredibly rare in Ethiopia to be drunk as a woman in public. So she must have had incredible suffering going on in her life. So I really, hold her with compassion and wish that she can be happy. And so it's also a way of purifying whatever karma I did to deserve that. So it's been incredibly helpful shifting that view out of making myself a victim into having compassion for her. Let's see. Kind of connected to this, lately I've been reading Viktor Frankl's books, Man's Search for Meaning, about his life in Auschwitz. He was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, a Jewish psychiatrist, who actually he chose not to leave and go to America. He had a visa, but he chose to stay to take care of his parents, which didn't work out so well. He spent a lot of time in Auschwitz. And it's an incredibly powerful book about the suffering that goes on there, and his trying to understand the psychology of the people committing the harm, the soldiers, even people that were prisoners themselves, then dominating and treating their peers incredibly harshly. And so it's a very powerful, very poignant book of him unpacking kind of the psychology of people, and also what makes people be able to survive and to get through those incredibly hard times. And I've been taking lots of quotes as I read that book. And one thing that stood out was he said, "It's not the physical pain which hurts the most. It is the mental agony caused by the injustice, the unreasonableness of it." And I guess this line stood out because it kind of fit those stories that I just shared, that really what hurt most was the not feeling understood, not understanding the reason for those people to cause harm to me. To show me kind of such disrespect. And I mean, really what hurt was not being seen as just a human being, that they not being recognized as having feelings and needs. And sadly, in today's world, we're seeing that so much, of people not recognizing the humanity of others, not recognizing, showing respect, or having empathy for each other. And it's also really confusing a lot of times to understand kind of the motivation and the reason for why people are doing such things. But sadly, when I look a little deeper, I think again and again and again, comes down to money and power. And sadly, I had a coworker who said, "Follow the money." And sadly, that line, "follow the money," again, trying to understand the reasoning behind something. If you look to the money, that's quite often the reason driving people to do their behaviors. And even just this morning, I was doing my weekly death meditation and reviewing my life and actions that I've done that I caused harm and regret doing. And I could really see that so many of those actions were linked to attachment, wanting praise, reputation, getting my way. And so just seeing how strong that wanting praise, following the 8 worldly concerns, those evil 8 worldly concerns that Lama Zopa hammered into Venerable for so long, that's, again and again, those are what cause so much incredible pain and suffering. And also when I was in New York, I was walking, we were at like a little art fair with my nephew, who's 9 years old. And he was like, "Man, if I could set up my lemonade stand here, I would make so much money." He was just trying to scheme how he could, because there was an empty booth, and he was like, "Can I use that empty booth to set up my lemonade stand? I'd make so much money." And I could kind of see how obsessed he was with the idea of getting money. And I kind of just asked him, I was like, "Would that make you happy? If you had a ton of money, would that make you happy?" And he kind of just paused and was like, confused, like, "But that's what I've been taught, is if you have a lot of money, you have power." And so it was good to have that little conversation with him. I've also been reading his, kind of to balance the heaviness of reading about Auschwitz and the Holocaust. I've been reading a book by His Holiness Dalai Lama called Beyond Religion, Ethics for the Whole World. And it's, I think, incredibly timely and helpful. And I've just started the book, but he really highlights 2 pillars for secular ethics, which in my mind really ultimately are guidelines for pillars for leading a meaningful and satisfying life. And one of them is shared humanity. deeply recognizing and acknowledging that every sentient being just wants happiness and just wants to be free from suffering. And that this is what motivates all of our actions, even if sometimes they're incredibly confused and harmful strategies. That's what's really underlying all of our motivations. And then the second pillar is interdependence, recognizing that interdependence is a key feature of our human reality, that we're so not separate or independent, and that our actions really do impact each other in so many ways. And recognizing that we're connected to really every single sentient being, and that by recognizing this, we move beyond our narrow self-interest and find much greater meaning. Recognizing that we find deeper meaning, greater purpose, and satisfaction in life. And that it's much more meaningful than having just money and power. And so a way to summarize kind of these two pillars is that to have a meaningful and happy life is really to switch the me into we, just turning that upside down of really recognizing that we have this shared humanity and our interdependence, and really recognizing that can really bring so much more joy and benefit to ourselves and to each other. So let's work on doing that.